Well, I'm excited to welcome Coach Jen back with us for our part three of our three-part series, all about improving your strength by creating space in the body. And so if you haven't listened to part one and part two, I do highly encourage you to go back and listen to those after you listen to today's. So today we're going to talk specifically about posture, how poor posture can really be detrimental to our health and our body and what it's actually doing. What does poor posture actually mean it's doing to your body? So you all can start to understand and learn more about your body. We're going to obviously share with you why good posture matters and obviously lots of tips and things that you could all start doing today because posture is absolutely everything. Part one, we talked about movement, specific movement, and obviously is really important, right? To become stronger and what that means and how you can create more space in your body through movements in particular. And then part two is all about breathing. You guys, breathing is everything. I cannot stress how often I just hear from clients and students that say, gosh, just me bringing more awareness to my breath is helping the pain in my body. It's helping me to feel less stressed. It's just helping me to feel better. And it is so incredible. So that is a piece of posture as well. So we'll hit on it briefly today, but to go deeper on that, you'll definitely want to listen to last week's episode where we talked about that. So today, in talking about how we can improve our strength by creating space in our body through posture. And I know sometimes this whole creating space idea, people are always like, Erica, what do you mean by creating space in the body? Well, ultimately, a lot of pain and dysfunction comes because we lack space in our body. Like bones become closer together, so our nerves don't have the space that they need to function optimally. We get stagnation in the body, fascia gets tight and restricted, and all of these things and kind of like bind down, and our joints don't have enough space. Think about it. I think the best way, and this is a good segment into us talking about posture, is think of someone as they get older. I would say women in particular, you will see it with men, but I feel like we do see it more with women, is that really extreme kyphosis, that rounded shoulder, like we hear from people as they get older, oh my gosh, I've gotten shorter. Well, the reality is you haven't gotten shorter. Your tissue has gotten more restricted and tighter, and we're losing space in our body that we don't have to. And something that can sound a little crazy, and I'll share this testimonial right out the gate here, is time and time again, I hear from clients or students of mine that go to their doctor and the doctor's measuring them multiple times because they're like, wait a minute, you're taller now than you were last year at your wellness visit. And they're like, that's not possible. And I'm like, no, it's possible. You didn't actually get taller per se. We got height back. And I'm talking, these are 60-year-old plus women where this is a very, very common thing when they start to implement these practices that Jen and I teach over here. So something to really keep in mind as we are talking about and sharing things today is just remember, and my biggest philosophy is it's not about adding more to your life. It's about thinking about how we're already moving during our day, during our movement practice, and specifically more during our day. And the things that we're going to talk about, how can you start to shift the way that you're thinking about how you're holding your body during your day? And I really want you to go into this conversation thinking about that. Don't think, oh gosh, it's more for me to add onto my plate, more to dos. It's the opposite of that. I want to help you make everything that you're doing in your day that much better for you. But just remember, especially if you're newer listening to the stuff that we're going to share today, this stuff does take time because not only are we having to shift the way we're actually holding our body, we have to rewire our brain. And so we have to give ourselves grace and time and be kind to our body and just have that, just constantly remind ourselves to move the way we want to be moving. So there you have it. Let's go ahead and dive right in. I'm going to let Jen start us off here talking about what poor posture can do to our body.
Okay, so when you were talking about that testimonial you gave, it reminded me of these two men, older gentlemen. We're not going to call them old, but they were just some older gentlemen that I got to work with. Very strong men. They worked out very hard. But either their occupations, one was a potato farmer, or just their life had just kind of bound everything down, tightened everything down. They were a little more rounded. They were still very strong in the gym. But I got to get my hands on them and work with them when I brought core rehab into this gym and worked with them. And especially as I watched my potato farmer get his posture back, get stronger, he stopped having the shoulder pain he was having. He got stronger at the weights he was moving just from that simple posture. His aches and pains left. We had, and then my even older gentleman had just had a total knee, if not two total knees. And he was very stiff in his movements. And so just to get him into some postures to do some movements were hard in the beginning. But by the end, he was doing everything by himself. He was stronger. He felt better. He told me he felt younger. It was amazing. So let's take our potato farmer. If we think about this just hunched over, tightened posture. I mean, this guy was he was built like a potato. He was just solid mass, but he was rounded. He was tight. So my son has been playing Jenga a lot, been playing with the Jenga pieces. And if you think of when you first put your Jenga tower together, it is strong. It is straight up and down. It is strong. It's immovable. But as we start breaking in pieces and changing things, it gets weaker and weaker. That's what our body's going to do. If you were a hose and I was watering my garden and my kids came out behind me and kinked the hose, the water's not going to flow like I need it to, right? The water's going to stop. It's going to lessen. But if we unkink that hose, then it all comes back. And think of that like with your strength. If we put a kink or we change your posture with your strength, we're going to weaken you. We're going to weaken at areas. Your circulation, getting your blood flowing. You want that flowing as best you can because it does so many great things for you. That's why you need your posture. You need that tall length is to help things to flow, get the oxygen rich blood into the muscles and the cells that we need it, pull all the gunk out. Same with the lymphatic system. We need to help that lymphatic system circulate and drain and pull the gunk out so that we can be healthy and so that our body can continue to regenerate. And so if your posture is rounded, stuff gets stagnant and stuck. Same with your energy. If you've ever, if you've done any energy work before, they always work off of a tall posture. You want your vertebrae stacked one on top of the other. Or you can't get that energy flowing. The signals with your nervous system aren't going to move as easily. So that's why posture is so important. But also where your posture lies, so where you are more likely to be in your posture, your muscles will be also. So if I am someone who all day works stocking shelves, right? I'm moving stuff. I work in a warehouse. I'm pulling stuff off. This whole part of me is going to be stronger, kind of, because it's tighter. It's going to be bound down and tight, which means everything on my backside is going to be weaker because now it is stretched and it is lengthened, which is going to increase my likely of neck injury, shoulder injury, anything with the arm, including down to the back, but it will even affect me all the way down to my feet. So where you hang out in your posture, your body is going to morph to that. And you're going to start getting tight, grippy muscles. Everything is going to slow down and get more sluggish in your body because you're changing things. The nerves get more pinched on when I'm stuck here instead of being able to open up and be nice and tall. The biggest kicker, even just me sitting down to do this, it will get me your hip flexors. If you are in that seated position, a more more down position, your hip flexors just bind. They are the grippiest muscles in your body, in my opinion. There's been no scientific test to prove that probably. I haven't looked it up, but they just grip. And my hip flexors love to grip because of my leg length dysfunction. So when I stand up, I'm going to have to move and counteract what I just did. Because just 20 minutes of sitting, they're going to be like, oh, we're in our shortened position, and they're just going to grip straight down. So you want to pay attention to your posture throughout the day, to your repetitive motions. If you are doing a repetitive motion in one direction, so if it's, working here, if you're a golfer and you're always swinging in one direction, we need to unwind you the other way. You've got to start now doing motions in this way as the golfer, or back behind you if you are that, you're that warehouse stalker.
Yeah. So another posture that's really common, especially with our ladies, is holding a toddler baby on one hip. And I have this conversation all the time. I'm like, it's hard, I know, because especially if you're right-handed, you're going to tend to put your kiddo on your left hip so you can do something with your right hand. And I get it can feel easy, and in the moment maybe it feels fine, but as time goes, likely SI joint pain starts to happen, back pain, neck pain, all sorts of things can start to happen. Pelvic floor dysfunction can even happen because you start to get this shift in the posture. We start to get twisting and all sorts of things. And then we wonder why our body hurts. And it's not your fault. That's why we have these conversations. It's because these are things we have to start to bring awareness to. And so that's why I always tell my moms, especially when your kiddo's little enough, put them in a baby carrier in front of you with something that you can put around your hips. I feel like today, I think they're better. I like the cloth ones because then you can kind of mold it to your body and adjust it a little bit better. But I do know some of the kind of static ones where you can't adjust them as much. I feel like they are better now than they were like when my oldest, who's 16, was a baby, right? They didn't even exist. So we use a wrap all the time, but you want something that's going to go around your hips to also give your hips support, because again, we're tired, especially when you're in that phase of having little kids and you're just exhausted. So having that support around your hips can really help. But as much as you can, if you have to hold them and they're too big or whatever to put in a wrap on you, you could put a wrap. I know they have different things now. I see different things where you could even put a wrap so they're on the side of your hip, but you have some support. There are so many different things that we can do, but recognizing where sometimes what's like the cause of our pain or dysfunction, or recognizing maybe we feel fine now, but if we're doing some of these habits, recognize that there are things we can do today to start to pull ourselves out of it so we can be preventing pain and so on and so forth. And that rounded forward posture, right, is so common, and it's starting so much younger. So anything that we're talking about here, I am going to encourage all of you that have kids, whether they're little kids, they're grade school kids, they're high school kids, they're out of school children, older, reminding them about their posture. We do not get reminded anymore about our posture. It seems as though it's the thing we can wear, like, sloppier clothes, and, kids go to school in sweats and whatever, which is fine. I don't have a problem with that, but it kind of exudes this whole societal thing of like, it's okay to look sloppy and it's okay to be rounded forward all the time or slouched back in your chair, so on and so forth. And we need to be reminded about posture. And it is so important. It seems almost so simple that it gets neglected, because I think so many times we're looking for like a magic pill or this big answer to something. And, sometimes there's little things out there that are helpful, but foundational is posture. That's why this conversation today, this and breathing, maybe like the most important conversations that we really ever have, because it's amazing to me when someone starts to bring more awareness to what is going on inside your body. And that's the first step to all of this, is that what we can start to shift. So when we're sitting, right, how are we sitting? So if you're sitting right now, check how you're sitting. Does your seat have a back to it? Do you feel yourself rounding back and leaning into your chair? Well, that's really not good for your back. It's not good for your pelvic floor. It puts pressure on your pelvic floor. It shuts off your pelvic floor muscles. And again, you're going to put a lot of pressure on your low back, SI joint, all of that, neck, so on and so forth. It's going to encourage that roundedness forward. So sitting, the best thing, and this is what I always recommend, is like just a flat, harder chair. If you need a little cushion, fine, but nothing that's super cushiony where you're going to sink into it and it causes your pelvis to tuck. So we want to be sitting up nice and tall on our pelvis. So I'm always like, wiggle around, like find your sits bones, like go from your pubic bone to tailbone, sits bone to sits bone, and kind of find that middle for you. Some of you might find you can't sit up straight right now, and that's okay. You have to start with where your body is today, but we have to start to bring awareness to this. Same thing when we're standing. How are we standing? I use a standing desk sometimes, but I also sit sometimes. And I think it's really important that we change up how we're holding our body in our day. Like Jen was talking about, if we're sitting so long, our hip flexors, and we have a lot of conversations about those tight hip flexors. We have so many women that are like, Erica, Jen, my hip flexors just will not shut off. So we have to retrain the body that the hip flexors don't need to be doing all the work. They're there for a reason, but they should not be like on all the time by any means for us. So we have to start paying attention to how we're sitting, how we're holding our body, how we're holding little ones, how are we carrying just things in our life, and what is the position of our pelvis. It's very common when we're sitting, when we're standing, to have that tucked pelvic position. And that's one of the first things I always work with people, is to start to go out, work out of a tucked pelvic position. Because like Jen was talking about, like what poor posture does is that tucked pelvis. For example, we get usually a lot of restriction in the glutes. And if we're standing or sitting with a tucked pelvis, like I said, pelvic floor shuts off, puts pressure on the pelvic floor, low back, neck, so on and so forth. So many times, just by bringing more awareness to our pelvic position, sitting, standing, doing exercises, you can apply any of this to exercises, that starts to bring people out of that poor posture and moving them into better and improved posture. Now, that said, we have to give our body time to make these changes. Fascia does not like to be forced to be changed. So sometimes we'll have someone who's like, oh, well, if I untuck my pelvis and my low back hurts. Okay, well, of course it does if you do it too aggressively. And we go from a tight, locked, tucked pelvis position to all of a sudden now we want to sit up high on those sits bones, but your tissue is like, whoa, that's so foreign to me. Your back's going to grip and grab now to compensate. So we have to bring awareness to our body and slowly encourage these things to shift. And this is where, kind of going back to part one, movement is very important because it can help to wake up the muscles that we need. So if you are someone who feels like your pelvis is what I'm talking about, that kind of tucked under, locked position, then the movement piece could be a really big piece for you to start to unlock that pelvis slowly. We can't do this overnight or undo poor posture overnight, because we didn't get into poor posture overnight. And this is the thing, I think, again, we live in this instantaneous gratification world. Everybody wants results yesterday. And I cannot stress enough how we have to work with our body, and we have to bring constant awareness. Put sticky notes up, tell the rest of your family, anyone that lives in your house with you, what you're working on with your posture. Get them on board too, whether it's a spouse or your kiddos, and everybody can kind of be in it together and remind each other, because it takes repetition and reminder. Because remember, we're not just retraining your body, but we're retraining your brain. So those are some kind of common things we see with posture. Jen, what else do you want to add to that?
Well, I like that you talked about how you can't fix it overnight. One of the biggest things when I teach posture, one of the examples I use is a saltwater taffy machine. If you've been to the coast and you've walked by a candy shop, chances are you've seen the saltwater taffy pullers that slowly pull the taffy in opposite directions. If they didn't pull the taffy like this, it would be hard, crunchy, brittle, probably break your teeth. It's the taffy you don't want. But with this slow, methodical movement over time, the taffy becomes moldable and pliable and movable and soft. And that's the same thing with our fascia. When our fascia is pulled in opposing positions, meaning we are lengthening through the posture, then all of a sudden our fascia starts to get this nice, easy pull to it. It's in and out, and it gets softer and more flexible. And it actually lays down in this really beautiful grid web-like design. Kind of think of a really pretty spider web. But when you're not having that lengthening and that opposition and movement and pulling, it actually binds down, and it looks like if you were to grab a piece of felt out of one of the bags you can use like to stuff quilt. I don't even think that's called felt, but it's something like that. It's just a mesh. It's a mess. It's like if when your daughter brings you her Barbie hair and says, Barbie hairs is a mess, and you're like, oh my gosh, what did you do? Put it in a blender? It binds down and it becomes really tight. And so when our fascia is like that, it doesn't get the lubrication it needs. It doesn't get the moisture fed to it to help it to be soft. And this is where injuries come from. And a lot of times we just look at, if you're coming to me with a shoulder injury, I'm going straight thinking, okay, labrum, rotator cuff. But what about all the fascia that surrounds and helps out that area? If it's become brittle, now your movement is affected. So now other things to that shoulder are going to be affected. So that's why you need that opposition. And it's not just about sitting tall. Because if I said to a lot of people right now, I want you to sit tall, how many of you right now can feel your glutes and your hamstrings kicking in to help you get taller? Because now you've overreacted to it and you've actually tucked your pelvis. You've done an anterior tilt to your pelvis. So if I just said lengthen through the top of your head and your bum, now do you feel your core on? And your core is helping to give you that length. So there's kind of a difference with that. And I think getting in younger people, because a lot of people will think, well, my posture's fine. I sit up against my seat in the car, even though your car seat's totally reclined, or I sit in my couch and my couch is reclined. People don't realize that puts you in that tucked pelvis position and you're kind of rounded. Your core's completely off in those positions. You can even buy the ergonomic work chairs, which mine is, but I sit up off the back. I don't lean back onto my chair. I am up on that bony part of my bum with my feet flat on the floor or up on a box, and I can sit tall that way. But when I start to get tired, I lean back. The first thing that changes is my pelvis position very quickly. It's my pelvis or my thoracic region. So get people to sit up. And like Erica said, some will say, oh, my low back hurts. Another big one is, oh, my in between my shoulder blades hurt. Yeah, because you're activating that mid back to hold you up instead of being here. So it takes time. It's just like a regular exercise routine. You get soreness as you build and strengthen muscles, as you lubricate these proper, movement channels, as you get your lymphatics and your circulatory and nervous system all functioning again. You're going to feel that soreness. It's just like a workout, but it does take time, but with constant working at it. And it might be, setting a 5-minute timer on your phone to be like, oh, sit up straight if I'm at work. It's little things like that, but soon 5 minutes, you'll be like, oh, I'm still sitting up straight. And you can increase that until you're not setting timers, but that's not going to be within a month of trying to work on this. It's going to take some time.
It's a lifestyle, you guys. And it's the sooner you recognize, like, okay, these are things that are not quick fixes. They are things we need to learn to live a healthier life, right? Because the way our body moves, mobility, this is why I get so passionate about it, because I see as people age and mobility declines, so does health generally. Not always, but generally they coincide together. So mobility is so important. And the reason, again, I know most of you listening are in your 30s and 40s. I've surveyed you. I know the age of most of you. And some of you are thinking, or maybe most of you are thinking, well, actually, I would say probably only some of you, because a lot of you listening, I'm sure, have some sort of pain or dysfunction. I mean, gosh, Jen and I, like I'm almost 40 here. She's in her early 40s. And, we've had our stuff. And so what blows my mind sometimes to think is like this, we have pain so much younger than sometimes we want to like always really truly acknowledge. And it's like, okay, well, if we're already dealing with it now, what happens in 10, 20, 30 years from now? That's why these conversations are so important. So start making these little changes today. And something I really wanted to help give a visual for everybody to keep this focused around posture is what's overworking when we have poor posture is those hip flexors, the front of those hips. It's your low back and it's your pecs, your chest. So when Jen was talking earlier, right, people that are working or you're at a computer a lot, things like that, you're going to be tighter in those areas, right? So front of the hips, low back, chest. So if you guys can all kind of visualize that, that's like a zigzag in the body. So what does that do? When those areas are on all the time, then the opposite tends to be weaker. Well, when we have those areas that are they're taking over essentially. And then we start to have these aches and pains. Well, a lot of the areas we might be feeling the pain are because they're compensating, right? We think, oh, they feel tight, but it's because they're taking over because they don't have the support where they need to be. Instead, the opposite of that zigzag, so if all of you are visualizing with me, okay, hip flexors, low back, chest, that's what we see a lot in poor posture function movement. We want to actually start to think about stronger, better strengthened hamstrings, glutes, but not a tuck tight glute, not like that. We want to like feel a hamstring lift underneath the glutes, which helps with pelvic floor function. We want to feel that lower belly start to work, and not drawing belly to spine, but it's like a lift up. So we start to visualize hamstrings working through the pelvic floor, lower belly, and the mid back. So remember how Jen said, oh, when you start to improve your posture, your mid back might start to get sore. We hear this all the time from women that are like, my mid back like hurts. And I'm like, okay, well, is it actually hurting or is it muscle soreness? I don't know exactly why it is, but the mid back is tender. And I just think it's because my theory and what I see is that it just, those muscles have not worked for a lot of women for a long time because we've overcompensated with our pecs and our neck, and we haven't been using that mid back. So if we now can start to think, oh, we should actually be using our mid back a little bit more than our pecs. I always tell people when it comes to weightlifting, we should be doing twice as much pulling instead of pushing. People like want to do, I mean, not women as much per se, but I see this in the male dominant world of weightlifting. They want to do all these chest press. And I'm like, I mean, you could do a chest press. That's fine. I don't have a problem with it, but make sure you're also activating your mid back when you're doing it. And most people look at you like, this is a chest exercise. I want to like pump up my chest. And I'm like, that's great and all, but it's going to continue to exacerbate poor posture. So if you're going to the gym or doing any of our workouts at home, that's why I'm always like back extensions, back extensions, back extensions with the focus on your mid back. That is huge. Do not dump into your low back, you guys. If any of you are doing back extensions, I don't care what form it is, rowing, lat pulls, any of that, do not let your low back be doing more of the work than your middle back. And then we ought to think those hamstrings and lower deep core, right? So that's why going into all the pelvic floor stuff that I teach you guys. So those of you that are thinking, oh, she talks all this pelvic floor stuff that doesn't affect me, it does affect you, because that part, understanding more about your pelvic floor and breathing and all of that, can help with your posture. That's why it's so important. And I've been trying to talk about this for years, no matter what your body's dealing with, but that's where that connection really can come in. And especially with posture, it can be very, very, very powerful. So one last thing I want to mention, so we can wrap up here, because I wanted to keep this short and sweet and lots of good little nuggets for all of you, is when you improve your breathing or improve your posture, it will help you to improve your breathing. So if you listened to last week's episode about breathing and you're like, okay, this is great and all, Erica, but I feel like I'm struggling with it. I feel like I've got to like force my breath. Well, we have to also be working with our posture as well. So breath can help improve your posture, as can improving your posture also help improve your breathing. And when we do that, we can improve our energy, help decrease the stress through our body, which can have such amazing, amazing positive effects on just how you feel during your day. So Jen, I know I shared a lot of tips. Is there any last things from a postural perspective that we want to make sure we share with everyone?
I would just say making sure that you are getting up and moving from whatever position you are in at least every hour. If you can do it every 30 minutes, perfect, at least every hour. If you are a teacher in a school, whether it's little kids or college kids, get them up and let them move. It helps with the brain even and getting everything going again. Just get up and move out of that position. At first, especially if you're teaching older kids, you might get looked at funny. Or if you're at work in a cubicle space, people might look at you funny. But as you start to feel better, as your kids start to notice their energy getting better and their ability to remember what they're learning in class getting better, as you start to be a happier employee and you work better and you're out sick less, everyone else around you is going to start to take notice. And then they're going to want to do this. They might go hide in the bathroom stall and do it, that's fine. They're moving, they're getting out of the posture they were in. The kids are going to start to enjoy it, and they're going to look forward to your class because they get that movement piece out of the sitting, writing posture, head down, that they get everywhere else. So my thing is just get up and move in the opposite direction for like 2 to 5 minutes max. You could even do 1 minute if that was all you had, but just open things up. You stretch, do some like shoulder blade, rows with an imaginary weight. Whatever it is, just get up and move and get into a better posture, and your body and your mind and those around you will thank you for it.
I'm glad you mentioned that with the brain connection. Actually, the interview I did yesterday, which is coming up soon, you guys, we talked a lot about kids and movement, and it's a good episode. So I'm excited for all you to listen to that. So hopefully this has been really helpful for all of you listening. Again, some of you, I know this is reminders, but again, we can all use that reminder. Like I can use those postural reminders. Sometimes I get deep in my work and I'm like, oh yes, posture, I need to move and change my position, right? It is just one of those things we just have to make a part of our life, and we're going to continually work on it and remind ourselves. And as time goes, it will get easier. So I'm so grateful that you were here listening today. As always, share this episode with everyone in your life. Everybody, men included, can benefit from learning and improving their posture. Absolutely. It's a little bit of information with posture can really go a long way and honestly really transform a lot of people's lives and how they feel. So thank you all so much for sharing today's episode. And as always, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out. You can always reply to any of my emails, newsletters that you get. And of course, if you are not on there yet and you have not yet signed up for my free pelvic floor guide, be sure to get that. It's on my website, ericazeal.com/pelvic floor, or it's on my homepage always. So you can easily find it there. So thank you all so much for tuning in. And again, check out the first 2 of this 3-part series if you have missed either one of those episodes. And I look forward to seeing you back next week.